Well, hey, welcome to the Impactus Young Man's Podcast. My name is Jordan, and we help young men become, grow, and live as disciples of Jesus and help them navigate what it means to be a Christian man in today's cultural moment. Today on the podcast, we've got Chris Papalardo, and him and his friend Clayton Green wrote this book called Building Spiritual Habits in the Home. It is a must-read for single guys. If you're newly married or if you have young kids, you got to read this. And this is going to help you build a life that has Jesus at the center and really spiritual disciplines and habits that will not fade, not last, but help you be the man that you want to be. So that and so much more on today's podcast. And so let's jump right in. Well, hey, Chris, man, thanks for coming on the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here, Jordan.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked to be talking today about your book, Building Spiritual Habits in the Home. And I read it, and I'm going to tell you, man, very timely for me as a young dad.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, we've got 3 under 4. Well, 3, 4, and under. And
Wow.
So, learning as I go about some of these things.
Yeah, that is definitely the blitzkrieg time of parenting, where you're just every day it's relentless, and you're like, can I make it through? I've got my kids are 10 and 7, so I can tell you a little glimpse from your future. It does get easier.
Good.
All of it is rich and beautiful,
Yeah.
but it's just 4 and under. It's just like, wow, it just keeps coming and coming and coming. So.
Yeah, man. No, it's been a wild ride just trying to sort out what do the spiritual rhythms and habits in our home talk about. Now, I'd love you to just give our listeners a bit of a glimpse as to kind of who you are and where you're from, and then maybe transition into how this book came about.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm married. I've got 2 kids who are 10 and 7. My day job is I work at a place called the Summit Church here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but my wife and I have been here in North Carolina for over 20 years. This project came up because a friend of mine, Clayton, who also works at the church, we were both kind of dissatisfied with some of the spiritual rhythms we had in our own home. And so we started workshopping, trying to solve, like, why is this stuff not working? I think we believe the right stuff, and we are trying to teach our kids the right stuff, but sometimes it feels like it's just not connecting. And this really came to a head for Clayton specifically. This was about, I think it was 7 years ago. His oldest daughter was 5 or 6, and on December 23rd, so like right before Christmas, she said, she's a kid of incredible candor. She said, "Mom, Dad, I know you say that Christmas is all about Jesus, but it sure feels like it's all about presents."
Wow.
And yeah, it was just, talk about a punch to the gut. But they looked around at what they had done, and they realized, like, okay, clearly she's picking up on something with the way we've crafted our home, how we're spending our time. And by December 23rd, you've kind of missed your chance, right? So the next year, he reached out to me and he was like, we've got to make this better. We've got to make this Advent season one that they actually sense this is about Jesus, which started us on now a 6-7 year journey of creating products that just kind of nudge people in the home towards the spiritual habits we want. There's a ton of great resources out there. There are 1,000 fantastic books. But I don't know, Jordan, if you're anything like me, my struggle is like, I'll read a great book. I just don't know how to get it going. And so sometimes it's like, please, like, can you put this on the very bottom shelf for the dummies of the world like me? And that's where this, like, Good Kind, the company that we started, came from that. And then this book is basically us packaging that and saying, hey, here's how we did it. Here's how you can do it too.
Yeah, it's very cool. The language you use there is really interesting around his daughter sensing something, right? Like, and as I'm raising kids, that just like that verse that talks about like training a child in the way they should go, and they will not depart from it. I think I'm a really good teacher. Yeah. But I don't know if I'm a great trainer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And we picked up on that. Eugene Peterson wrote about the difference between teaching and training with that verse specifically. And he talked about the idea of congruence. And this is what Clayton's daughter noticed. It was this lack of congruence. You're saying one thing, but when I look at this life, I'm feeling another. Mm-hmm. And the trick with training is to align them. For instance, your kids are too young for this, but the oldest one is close to the point where you could is it a boy or a girl?
It's a girl.
Okay. You're close to the spot of being able to go to Target, give her a credit card, and ask her to go buy something. Like, you probably don't want to do that. You might get in trouble for releasing a 4-year-old to wander in the store by herself. But at some point, it's going to get to the point where you go to the store and you could release her with a credit card to go purchase something. And at no point are you going to go through the mechanics of all right, now here's how you go and buy Sour Patch Kids.
Right.
Here's the process. No, she would just figure that out because we go to this store all the time. I understand the rhythms of it. It's embedded without you having to overtly teach it. So that is what that's training in a nutshell versus teaching, which is also very important.
Wow. No, it's good. And I think that's where the whole idea of habits, if you have spiritual habits in the home, they get to sense or observe or be trained by by actually seeing you do some things, and I've heard this book described as Atomic Habits meets Jesus. Can you unpack why some people have said that about this book?
Yeah. So I just mentioned Eugene Peterson, who I love reading. He's not the most, not always the most practical guy. Sure. It fires my imagination. It's beautiful. It's prayerful. But I often finish those and I'm like, I wish I could live a life like that. But man, nuts and bolts, put some flesh on this. So I love that world. And I also love the social science world, atomic habits. And habit science is having a moment, right?
Mm-hmm, totally.
And Clayton and I talked a lot about this. And we came to the spot of recognizing, you know what? We often think about these as separate things. Here are books about spiritual disciplines, about prayer and Bible reading, and that's good. And then here's the life hack books that tell you how to maximize productivity. And I don't know, they're not related. You pick one or the other.
Yeah.
But what we recognized the more we dug into stuff like Atomic Habits was these guys, they're not tapping into anything new. It's not like the way that you are formed as a person and your habits, God wasn't aware of that. And so the more we dug in, we're like, oh my gosh, everything they're saying, they don't even realize it. They're pointing back to biblical wisdom. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do with the book is to show, hey, these principles you might have heard on a TED Talk somewhere, they are good ideas. They're also biblical ideas. Let's just show you how and give you a little bit more oomph to pursue them.
Yeah, you talk about I think it's the 6 steps or shifts in the book, and we'll get to those in a moment. And it was just cool to see them tied to some of the biblical story of God's people. And anyway, I just thought I thought it was brilliant. But right from the beginning, something caught my attention that I just want to pick your brain on. Okay. You talk about how the goal of spiritual habits or disciplines or rhythms, these types of things, the goal is intimacy, right? Which I really appreciate. That my like you, my heart was awakened. Man, that's what I want intimacy with God. But I can't help but feel, even just from church culture and other things, that really we say that, but what we're ultimately shooting after is fruitfulness. And bearing fruit. Do you know what I'm saying? And so every time we talk about spiritual habits, where do we go to? John 15. If you want to bear fruit, right? Mm-hmm. You must. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious, where does bearing fruit, but not rushing to bearing fruit? Obviously, bearing fruit takes time and pace. But how do you reconcile the two? That our goal is not the fruit, though it comes. Sure. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is a big question. With John 15, I often think that a missing piece that it lives in there. The chapter is all about unity with Jesus and bearing fruit. But another thing that he mentions a ton in that chapter is this idea of love. Yeah. So I think if we were to reframe the fruitfulness as a matter of growing in love for God and love for others, that might change some of how we think about the spiritual disciplines, because that's harder to measure. It's very important. Yeah. But we love a scoreboard. It's just simpler, right? I don't know how to tell you, am I more filled with the fruit of the Spirit today than I was a year ago? That's a very important question that's very hard to answer. Yeah. But I could tell you how many verses of the Bible I've memorized, how many books of the Bible I've read in the past year, how many minutes I've prayed. And so it's, for those of us in the West, if you can quantify it, you can measure it and grow.
Right.
And I think that's all that this boils down to is it's a lot easier to measure how often somebody has been to church, how much they're giving, and how often they're reading their Bible. Those aren't irrelevant. But because they're easier to measure, then that's like, I guess that's fruitfulness, right? I've done these 5 things. And so intimacy is it's much more important, but more intangible. Here's another illustration that might help with that. I know not everybody listening here is married, but like if you're married, right, there are certain rhythms, certain habits that are involved in marriage that make for a healthy marriage. But everybody knows the goal is intimacy. You don't measure a healthy marriage based on like the number of date nights per year.
Right. Now,
a good marriage is going to have a good number of those. But if that's your only metric, we went on 40 date nights last year. Win. And that's the only thing you talked about or looked at, you'd say, like, I don't think you get what this is about. That's supposed to serve the intimacy, not stand by itself. So that's how I would say, if we could start to think about a relationship with God more like that, the stats and the rhythms, they aid in the intimacy, but they should never replace it.
Yeah, and it's almost like in my own journey, because I am someone, as you guys talk about in the books, the ones that need this like dumbed down to be super simple and super accessible. That is me. I actually took a Berkman assessment, I think it was one time, which basically like a personality assessment, and my need for structure was like my need for structure was basically 2 out of 100. So like, I don't, my mornings never look the same. I'm free spirited a little bit. And so I have such a desire in my heart to be kind of like the Eugene Petersons, like you said, like I have this desire. And so what I find oftentimes is the lack of fruit makes me realize I'm not abiding in the love of Jesus. Like it's kind of like the withering kind of alerts me to the fact that I need to kind of graft myself in. But the fruit itself is, though it's a kind of a symptom, it's actually not the thing that I should be going after. I should be going after the heart of Jesus, and the fruit will come. But yeah, anyway, I just love that differentiation, because my heart is like, oh man, I want to be more fruitful. I want to be more patient. I want to be more loving. I want to be this or that. And the call is actually, Jordan, I've called you to me before I've called you to kind of be anything. And so just thank you for kind of highlighting that. I think it's just such an important thing.
Yeah, I'll just say all of the truths we share in the book are ones that we are currently like preaching to ourselves. Like, I don't say this because I've arrived and I get it. Right. I say this because every day I'm tempted to go back to, what if I just grinded a little harder and pushed a little harder and impressed people with the things that I'm doing? And I need the reminder that God says, you know what, this is a very long, slow process, and I'm the one doing it. What I need from you is to pay attention to me and respond and be in my presence. And I need you to cool it a little bit. And I'm like, okay, all right, he's right. I need to take a step back, sit in his presence, linger. So it's all medicine that we need personally.
Yeah, no, this is good. And I honestly would describe your book as almost like that breath, like that stepping back in the kind of the chaos and hurriedness of life. And the 2 words that you use is the idea of pace and grace. Yeah. Can you unpack about what you mean by that?
Yeah. The first part of the book, you kind of hinted at this, talks about 5 roots. That's how we frame it, because we talk about the kind of the tree metaphor is a big piece for this, that idea that we are growing up in Christ, but it is very, very slow. Yeah. And these roots that are true about our spiritual habits, a couple of them are very, very vital. One is that God prefers to work slowly. And so that's where the word pace comes from. His pace is, he can work quickly, but generally he works very slowly. And the other is that God is gracious. And so you've got his pace, which is slow, and his grace. My default, I think this may not be everybody, but I'll bet there's a lot of resonance here. My default is really high pace, really low grace. Yeah. Like this is how my world operates. Like if I go faster and hustle harder, everybody pats me on the back and thinks that I'm doing great. But in the kingdom of God, it's got to be slower, and it doesn't start with me doing things. It starts with what God has done for me. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think this is particularly new to people who believe the gospel. They're like, oh yeah, God is gracious, and he changes us. He does the work of sanctification slowly. Again, it's congruence. We believe this. We just don't know how that actually translates to what we're doing. And so we believe it in our head, and we're like, well, I'm not sure what that actually looks like. So let me just do the stuff that I'm used to over here. But if the more you can get comfortable walking at God's pace and in His grace, the more I think the spiritual disciplines become beautiful instead of burdensome.
No, I love that, and I think reading your book and reflecting on this, in order to walk at God's pace, you almost have the sense of like following and the responding to, not leading the dance, so to say. And you talk a lot about in the book about actually responding. One of the roots you also talk about is how God starts, right? Like nothing we do. Unpack that for our listeners, because that I think we think oftentimes when it comes to habits, we are starting this new thing, right? Yes. We are beginning this new relationship with God, but you kind of flip that on its head a little bit, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. And it's natural that with a new spiritual habit, you would think, okay, what do I need to do? Because there's something you haven't been doing, or maybe something you have that you want to stop. And a lot of the emphasis is on like, show me the roadmap. But when you look at Scripture, everything that's happening that's significant begins with God's initiative. Like, just go back to the very beginning. God creates Adam and Eve. And He's the one that calls Abraham and Moses and David. And you pick any Bible character. They don't go looking for God, find Him, and say, hey, I'm looking for marching orders. Go ahead and tell me what it is. No, like Isaiah, they're just going about their business. They have some vision. God meets them, and they say, oh, okay. Well, now what? Here I am, send me. I think the reason we don't recognize that that's true in our lives is because we don't have dramatic burning bush moments, literally. But if you look at what God has given us through Scripture and the church, we should recognize, oh no, He started here too. He's been doing something long before I was aware of it. If I'm talking to Him, I'm responding to what He said in His Word. He spoke first. I'm answering. Even the fact that I'm a Christian now is God was working in that years before I entertained thoughts of Him. I didn't know it. I didn't see it. But I have to start with that reality of like, no, he did this first. And I find that incredibly comforting because it takes the pressure off of getting it right the first time. Like I could start some habits, they can fail, I can start again. Because I'm not actually starting any of them. He started this.
Right.
And I'm just I'm joining the song in the middle. And the song's going to keep going, and He's inviting me to play or sing or dance. But I don't have the pressure of starting it all. And I feel like I can breathe when I really believe that and really live into it.
No, man, it's, and that's why I appreciate you guys didn't jump right to habits at the beginning. You set that foundation of some of these core things that you need to know at the beginning. And for me, the big standout ones was the starting one, and then the slow, gracious one. That was that was really important. Now, getting to kind of the 6 steps, I think is vital, especially for our listeners. Can you walk us through, just maybe list them off the top, and then if we could just quickly summarize each one of them, would be just a joy to do today, if you could do that.
Yeah, we can do that. So 6 small steps. Again, you'll find some version of a lot of these in habit science, not all of them. But we think these are all just arising very naturally from the soil of Scripture. So these are, with any spiritual habit, you want to, 1, make it easy. 2, make it tangible. 3, pick your place. 4, choose your timing. 5, make it playful. This is a unique one. And then number 6, find your friends. Mm-hmm. So the more you can do those 6 things, the more likely it is that your spiritual habit is going to continue. And if you're not, that also kind of clarifies why spiritual habits you might have tried in the past crashed and burned. Like, for instance, the first one is make it easy.
Really easy.
And really easy. Yeah. We even say ridiculously easy. Yeah. So much so that, like, set your target. If the goal that you've set for yourself is so small that you almost feel embarrassed to share it with somebody else, that's it. You've found your target. And the reason is we all know what it's like to start, like, have a lot of ambition for some new thing. I'm going to read the Bible in a year, right? And you have a lot of momentum, you got a lot of energy, and then 3 weeks in, you fall off the pace, and by week 6, you're way off the pace, and then you give up, and you just feel like a complete failure, and you stop. But if you contrast that with a much more measured goal, I'm going to read I'm going to read the Bible for 5 minutes a day. This is not the goal we want for everybody. That's not like the end target, but it's something everybody can do. But it's much more likely you're going to be able to do that every day for a week, and then 2 weeks, and then you're going to be excited because you're doing it. I set a target, I've hit it. It's actually very easy, and many days you'll do more than that. And even if you're actually reading the same amount of Bible over the course of a week, it feels different when it's over, you hit the 100% and you've gone over rather than only making it to 80% and feeling like you failed. So the momentum there helps to keep it going.
Yeah, and just a very practical, real time. I put this into practice, okay?
Right.
So I'll just tell you how this has worked out in the last 7 days. So I'm notorious for like I think what you guys call it in the States is like Grubhub or like Uber Eats type thing, right?
Stuff.
Oh man, like just especially in this season with small kids and stuff. And so it became a problem. All right, and
like
so
a financial problem.
oh
or
yeah,
like a
and just
problem.
both, man, both, yeah, in all categories. Anyway, and so I thought, man, I got to, how do I make this? Because I was always like, do not, eat takeout. That was kind of the goal, and I thought
which is huge.
That's huge, right? Like it feels like that's what I have to do, and ultimately it is what I have to do. But I just shifted and reframed it as like, just eat at home, because what I was doing was don't eat takeout, but you got to eat healthy. Right. And it's got to be balanced. It was kind of this big things. So I said, just eat at home. And so basically what I've done, and this might not seem like a win to some, but I'm still not eating the most healthy food, but I haven't spent $1 on takeout over the past week. And so now it's been like a week and I'm like, man, I got some momentum here. And it's just like, wow, I think I can do this. Now, am I where I want to be? Not even close, right? Like maybe I shouldn't have a frozen pizza for lunch, but nevertheless, I'm not spending the $28 on a wrap just to get it delivered right into my lap. So anyway, that's just like a real time vulnerable example of like, that was like an easy reframe. Instead of making it about not doing something or changing all my habits, it was actually just about like making it way more accessible, So anyway, thank you for opening my eyes to that. That was really helpful, man. And yeah, just thank you.
I'm glad. Yeah, we one of the beautiful things about this book, and as we teach at various places, is we have our own pet ideas of ways to apply this, things that we would imagine. But hearing from other people, where they're like, "Oh yeah, I heard this, and I tried this thing," I'm like, "I would not have thought of that," but that is exactly it. So no, I think it's a great example.
Yeah, you got to put it into context, and even just the making it tangible piece is helpful. Can you unpack that as well?
Yeah, this is maybe the most important, but also the most difficult.
Right.
There are, we have tangible items in Christianity that help you practice your faith. Like you have your Bible, which is like literally a physical thing. But there's a big difference between like stuff you have that draws you in, and stuff you have that you tend to ignore. Right now I'm looking the opposite side of my wall here. I've got a framed print that has a verse from Scripture. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. This is from Acts 2. It's beautiful, but I tend to ignore it because it's just a print on the wall. And it's not bad. But the trick is asking, well, how can I have a physical item, a tangible item that kind of interrupts my attention, that like draws me in? And like I said, very, very difficult to figure out what that thing is. But if you can get it, and if it's the sort of thing you gravitate towards, then you'll find yourself naturally wanting to do whatever spiritual habit you're after, or having your kids do that spiritual habit. This is a huge one. So for us, for instance, we made a thing called the Graticube with Good Kind because we wanted more gratitude in our homes. And we have tried every day at dinner, sitting down and asking everybody for like the highlight of their day. And that's fine, and it leads to good conversations. Sometimes it leads to them saying they don't remember anything. What happened at school? Oh, I don't know, stuff. It's the script that every child apparently is downloaded with when they're born. So it works sometimes, but like not all the time. So instead we were like, how can we make this a game? So we created a die. It's a 12-sided die. And you just roll the die, and on one side it has just a topic. So someone you saw today, something from nature, a food, a time that you helped somebody or they helped you, and you roll it and it lands on food, and you just say, "Ooh, mac and cheese. I love mac and cheese." And they'll say, "Yeah, thank God for mac and cheese." You hand it to the next person. It's not the most profound thing in the world, but the fact that it's a wooden die that's fun to roll means the kids want to do it. And the tangible aspect is the reason that they gravitate towards that, which I think is 100 times better than forcing your kids to have a gratitude journal, because they might begrudge the have to element of that.
Right. No, it's good. I think of, I don't know, it might have been Justin Whitmiller early or maybe Jared Lopes, but they have like this like burning candle fire pit thing that they put on their table every day. And it's just like a symbol. It's just something that like kind of grounds the experience. Or I've also heard you guys talk about the idea of like a prayer mat or something near your bed. So it's just like a visual cue. For us as a family, it actually changed our whole morning routine when we just had the kids' Bible, like within arm's reach of the table.
Yes.
Like, who would have thought something that easy? Now the kids go, "Hey, the Bible!" Like, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." So we'll just pull it over. And so the idea of making it tangible. And just curious, that cube, is that for purchase at the Good Kind? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, if anybody was to go to goodkind.shop, you can find any of our products, but that's one you'll find there. And it's one of our most popular because it is so like playful and simple and fun.
And as you said, it is the script that kids have downloaded in their brains. We do the what's your rose, bud, and thorn kind of. So what was the highlight? What was the kind of the down thing? And what are you looking forward to? But I keep getting it mixed up, and I keep calling it the Guns N' Roses. And my kids are like, I'm like, "All right, guys, it's time for Guns N' Roses." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, no, that's a different game. That's a different thing." Talk to us about choosing the timing and the value of that, man.
There's a fantastic book called When, The Scientific Secrets of Timing, by, I'm blanking the author. I think his name is Pink. Daniel Pink, yeah. And he talks about habit. This is not a Christian book, but in his experience and his research, he found that a lot of people just really get stuck or have a hard time with new habits because they don't think about when they start them. Right. And so he says, pay attention throughout the day to key moments in the day where maybe you have a little bit more energy, and then key moments throughout the year where it's easier to start or stop something. He calls them temporal landmarks.
Right.
So time feels like this amorphous thing where it's all split up evenly, maybe. We can split it into hours, minutes, whatever. But time is just like landscape where that every hour isn't created equally any more than any mile is. You've got these landmarks along the way where you go up to exit 9, get off at exit 9 and turn right. Look for the old Shell station. And if we recognize that in time, it would actually help us to situate ourselves. One of the most obvious here in terms of the year is New Year's.
Right.
People sense at New Year's, this year in front of me is brand new. I haven't made any mistakes yet. I could be a new person. And we all know what it's like to have a New Year's resolution and not follow through on it. But there is something about that moment where everybody together is like, all right, I can do this. And that's a good temporal landmark because it's like there's an enthusiasm and optimism there that's not usually there. By itself, it won't carry you to a new habit. We all know that. But you can use it as a good kickstart moment for that new habit. Yeah. So that's kind of the scope of the year. In terms of the day, there are moments of the day that are just a little bit easier to do significant things in. The Spaniards all nap in the afternoon because they recognize that nothing good's happening after lunch, so they might as well just sleep through it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that too, that to just recognize if you're looking to start a new biblical habit, most likely morning and evening are going to be the spots you look towards. And I think if we have kids, we recognize this. Those are kind of richer times of day, the spots that matter more. So pay attention more to those times.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, in our work with men, a lot of times the impetus or catalyst for change or new habits comes after they hit a wall.
Yes.
Right? And so they're almost like it's reactive rather than proactive. right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think that actually, if you can anticipate the timings in your day and your year, your week, you might not get to that place where you're completely obliterated by the pace of life you've been living, and not just totally crash and burn.
Yeah. I mean, a crash and burn moment is always a fruitful time to
Yeah.
take stock and try to find a new direction because you kind of need to, right?
Yeah.
But a temporal landmark can be, kind of like that little indicator light on your car
Yeah.
dashboard saying you're low on fuel.
Exactly.
So like stop for gas before you run out.
Right.
And you can have like a small, like there can be small moments of that self-reflection before you get to the utter disaster. Like key moments in your personal calendar. A lot of us will have a birthday, or if it's a significant birthday, you hit 30 or whatever, and there's this sense of like, wow, gosh, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? And I think we tend to downplay that, like, oh, that's immature, or I don't, midlife crisis. It's not a real thing. But I think there can be value in saying like, hey, this is a moment where something's going on in your soul to
Right.
try and take you higher and look at a decade of your life rather than day to day. Tap into that, take
Right.
stock. Is what I'm doing today going to be what I want? Is this the habit I want for the next 10 years? And if the answer is no, what a beautiful grace of God to you to open your eyes to that before you've ruined your career or you gotten yourself in a terrible spot in your marriage or something like that.
Yeah, again, it's about responding, right? It's about paying attention to what
Yes,
God is
yes.
doing and prompting within you. And so I think it was like Winston Churchill that said something along the lines of like, never waste a good crisis. Right now,
Nice.
he had different meanings of that, but I think if we can
bigger
pay
crises.
attention to those internal crises or those internal, feelings of languishing or feelings of like I'm longing for more. Perhaps it's time to respond to what God and the Spirit of God is saying in those. And so, yeah, choosing the timing is so important because you want to be able to do this. And talk to me through the next two, the picking your place and finding your friends.
Yeah, picking a place. This is actually really related to the tangible element. I think it's James Clear says, it's either James Clear or the Heath brothers. I get them mixed up. One of them says that we are often the victims of our environment, but we can also be the architects of the environment. So one of the most obvious things to think about this is like if you're in a room with a screen, your computer, your phone, a television, chances are, that has such a strong pull. You're going to want to turn the screen on and watch the thing.
Right.
And that's fine if that's what you want. But if you want to connect with people, if you want to connect with God, you don't want screens around because it does not nudge you the direction you want to go.
Right.
If you want to play music, Andy Crouch says, you might have to invest some money, but like have a piano or a guitar in the living room rather than the television. So again, it's a big thing to say like, oh man, how am I going to rearrange my whole house? But just a little bit of forethought to say like, what does the space around me make me feel like? Does it make me feel more reflective? Does it make me feel distracted and anxious? It doesn't even have to be screens either. It can be like the sight of my like physical to-do list on the fridge might make me stress out. So maybe I shouldn't do my quiet time at the kitchen table where I'm thinking out all the things I have to do. So that's environment. And the other, find your friends, is, again, habit scientists love this. There's just so much that doing new habits in conjunction with other people does to help those habits stick it out. It makes it more enjoyable. It helps with accountability because somebody else is doing the same thing. It actually makes it more meaningful. Of the six, for me, I find that find your friends is the most significant. They all matter. But when I tell somebody else, hey, for the next month, let's do this together. Let's, every day we're going to read a psalm together. I don't know why, but that pushes me to be accountable to that much more than if I vowed before God that I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
It makes me feel kind of sheepish. Does it not matter that I tell God I'm going to do something? I don't know. But the deal is I don't see God every day face to face. But if I tell Clayton, hey, we're going to pray this psalm together every day, I'm going to see him on Thursday. And it's going to be real awkward if I have to be like, oh, I'm sorry I let you down. So, finding somebody else to be a spiritual companion or companion on your spiritual journey, tremendously valuable.
Yeah, I'm just, I've been thinking about that. Last night I had dinner with an old friend and kind of shared in some of that fellowship because when you're a new parent, especially, it's easy to just get so isolated in your own world. But
Absolutely.
but I would be like yourself, like that accountability. And I like that word companion because most times in the ministry to men space, we use the word accountability, and that has a certain kind of connotation to it. But ultimately, what it's about is spiritual companionship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to accountability partners, and like we need that sort of corrective, almost like invasive at times. Someone who's going to ask the hard questions. That's really valuable. But we also need spaces where somebody just knows us very well, and we can encourage one another without feeling like you're going to the dentist or something. Like if that's all that our community with men is, we're going to get sick of it and not want to do it. Like there's got to be some element to it there. We're like, no, I enjoyed that. That was fun and good.
Yeah, and it's funny because one of the things that we often encourage men's ministry leaders or men that are leading men is, oftentimes when they see a guy come to group or come to church for the first time in a while, what's the first thing they say? He's like, "Oh man, where have you been?" It's like that is like the sure way to it's the sure way to kill like some guy's desire to come back. Is like the first thing you point out is that they haven't been present.
Yeah.
And I think if we can create cultures of men where they can just like genuinely have companionship and friendship and like it's not corrective in nature, like in the first interaction especially, it just goes such a long way where you can actually just enjoy God together. And sure, maybe there's time and space to do that, but I always see it. The first thing is like, hey, nice of you to show up. It's like, oh man, you just lost him. He's gone.
Yeah.
Like you lost it. But I think that's the whole thing about making it playful, and you guys talk about that as well. Like habit science and what you're talking about here, building spiritual habits in the home, especially when it comes to kids and stuff like that, the sillier, more fun it is, the more likelihood it's going to happen.
Yeah. And yeah, this started for us because we're doing this thing with preschoolers and elementary kids. And you can force them to listen to something if you're the dad, but like they're going to hate it if it doesn't have some sort of resonance with them. And so we recognize like if we're going to pray with them, if we're going to do gratitude, if we're going to read the Bible, this has to be appropriate for a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Which means it's got to have a playful element. It's got to be silly at times. But one of the things we've learned is, modulating things down to a 7-year-old level is actually really useful for grown-ups because it forces you to say, like, what's the core element here? Like, how would I explain this to a 5-year-old? That helps you understand it more. And being playful kind of gets you out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you can read the Bible a lot and like impress people with how much you know, and you can feel very proud if you explain a concept and everyone nods, they're like, "Ooh, that's good, well done." But like if you're playing with your kids, you're not thinking about how awesome you are. You're just in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's easy to lose yourself. You're not thinking of yourself. You're thinking of other people. Or you're thinking about what's going on right in front of you, and that's actually kind of a fast track towards humility,
right?
Because humility, C.S. Lewis said, isn't thinking of yourself less. It's not thinking less of yourself as if you hate yourself. It is thinking of yourself less.
Yeah.
And so moments where you could lose yourself in the person in front of you or what you're doing are helpful towards just that, insecurity of always having me on my mind.
Yeah. And that whole idea of humility is like the key ingredient to having like a playful home.
Yeah.
And like not taking yourself too serious.
Exactly.
What a great culture to set in your home. Like, and I was raised with parents that were like that. Like everything was just not too serious, and we were able to laugh at ourselves. But it is interesting, when you're standing in front of your kids as like a 3-year-old, and you're doing some silly, crazy dance, and like you're doing. That takes a level of humility that I think will translate, as you say, into the different areas of your life. That is probably God's grace in shaping us into be more like Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus said that he wanted the little children to come to him.
Yeah.
And I don't think the kids would have flocked towards Jesus if he was boring and wanted nothing to do with them. Like there's something about him that kids were like, I want to be close to this guy. So I have to think The Chosen has done this really well, I think, and showed that Jesus probably had a playful element to him that made people want to be near him, especially kids.
Yeah.
So,
Even his encouragement to be like children, obviously in
exactly.
their faith and their trust, but perhaps also just to kind of enjoy life and not be grumps.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday I was reading the scriptures and came across that passage in Philippians, and it just talks about how do everything without grumbling or complaining, and then eventually goes
Yes.
on to say you'll shine like stars in a dark and like wicked generation or something. And I thought, like, how do we shine as Christians? To just be people who are positive. Like
Yeah.
it's not complicated. It's just to be light and positive and airy and fun, and yeah, we don't have to get it twisted.
Yeah. I had a conversation with my wife recently, and we were reflecting on some friend, a volunteer at church, and she said, "You know what? This is somebody that I don't think a whole lot about this person because they're not prominent. They don't have a ton of stage time." But my wife goes, "You know what's great about her is every time I'm around her, I feel happier afterwards."
There you go.
And I'm like, I don't know how she does that, but that's beautiful. This idea of like, she might be going through something hard, but there's enough. She's shining in such a way that like she's attentive to you, and there's a good mood there, which is contagious. And I'm with you. I could definitely find myself in the grumps, which is also very contagious. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good, man. Listen, we're kind of rounding the corner here, third base. I want to get super practical for a second to the dad or the young man that's listening. Maybe they're like me and they've started and stopped a number of times. A number of New Year's resolutions have come and gone,
Sure.
or perhaps the chaos of the family is just kind of like there's a lack of rhythm and habits. What would be your encouragement to a guy that's just like habits are just not for me?
Yeah, I would say habits are for everyone because everyone has them, and so we can do a little work to choose those habits and try to cultivate them the way we want them, or they could be chosen for us. But a life full of habits is inevitable because this is how we live most of our lives, and that's not a bad thing. It is just a thing. But the good news there is a small change in a habit is possible and can bear a ton of fruit if you think of what that would do for the next 20 years. So I would say start with something and make it very, very small. Just, if you feel defeated that you're never going to be able to read through the Bible, this is just too intimidating for you, get up with somebody else, say, hey, what is a really easy target here? What is a very simple thing we could do? And then go ahead and do that. You say, okay, for the next month, we will read the book of Matthew. And I will read it for 5 minutes a day. And if I don't finish the whole book in the month, we'll just make it a 6-week thing. But like, take a tiny chunk, figure out how to make that a rhythm and a habit, and just start to plod away. Because it will make a difference over the course of 10 or 20 years. Even if it's the smallest little bit of incremental change.
Yeah, no, that's good. And just curious, how would you guide someone through actually choosing this kind of first or next habit? Is it the smallest change that would make the biggest difference, or some people might say the first thing you have to do is just open the book, brother, right? Like what would you say to a man like, okay, because in the book you talk about a number of specific habits and disciplines, but how would any help in stepping back, saying, okay, where do I kind of begin? Which one do I kind of jump into?
Yeah. I would say a couple things. One, the standbys that are always going to be fruitful and there's just, I think, easiest to step into are reading scripture and praying. Yeah. Most of us have some context for what that means, so that takes some of the mystery out of it. It's not as confusing, which is good. And you'll find a lot of other people who are doing those same habits, so it's easier to get somebody else to come on board with it. So if you really have no feeling at all, you're like, I don't know, just give me an assignment. I would say pick one of those, reading scripture or praying. But often, like Clayton and I what we will focus on is something we want to fuss with, or something that seems off.
Right.
Which again is how Good Kind started. We created an Advent resource because our kids had identified something wasn't quite working in the home, and it didn't sit right with us. So we were like, let's solve that. So if there's something you want to fuss with, you're like, man, I really just feel like, I just feel like I want to understand God better. And I say, oh, lucky for you, there's a whole book. And if you want to know God, just read a little bit every day. Or I just feel like life is frantic and out of control and fast. And it's like, well, prayer is very helpful for that. Mm-hmm. Start with that. You sit in silence for a couple minutes as you start your prayers because, spiritual habits are often antidotes to specific ailments. So if you can figure out what ailment is plaguing you, that can sometimes suggest the habit that you may want to fuss with or try next.
Yeah, no, that's a very good final word here. Sometimes spiritual disciplines are, would you say, antidote to ailments?
Yes.
Yeah, and so the question to listeners today, gentlemen, is what's the ailment? What's the thing you feel the Lord is kind of prodding you? And for me, man, Chris, it is in this season is just the idea of slowing. Just like for me, it's not an addition more so than it is a subtraction. In this season, for me, is to actually create the margin so I can hear and respond to what the Lord is already doing in my life. That I can see him for who he is. And so, Chris, man, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. You had so much great stuff to say. I wish we could have chatted more, but where can people find out more about you and Clayton and the things you're doing?
Yeah, I've already mentioned it a couple times, but if folks were to go to goodkind.shop, they can take a look at this book. They can see a lot of the products that we've made that will help them cultivate the good kind of habits in their homes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on today, man. Hopefully one day maybe we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, I'd love that, Jordan.
Thanks, bro.